I think we're going to move along to our second speaker, and that is Kevin Winter. Kevin Winter is going to tell us about the Peninsula paddle. And I don't know how many of you managed to have a look at the short video on YouTube that was the link of which was sent with Itasa's email. But it gives a good broad overview to what this project is about. Kevin, over to you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Rick, and good evening to all of you. I'm not sure it's evening for all of you, but I've so enjoyed your discussion. And so while Sakuna was busy talking there, I have set up a little question at the very end just to see whether I can get use of such a wonderful panel that's sitting in front of me here. Just by the way, and Rick asked the question, how many had seen the actual video at this stage? Come on, let's see if you're on the other side there. Can you put up a reaction with a thumbs up if you saw that video clip that I sent around? Let's see how many got up. Thank you. I see a couple of thumbs going up there. Yeah, great. Good. Good. Okay, so thumbs up, whether it's virtual or in real, in terms of it, a good deal of you. And I haven't seen the second part of the screen here as well. Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. So I think for a fair number of you, you can see what we were doing in this panel. At the very end, I've set up a question which says, how would you best transform an urban river in a big city? And there are probably some of you got experience in this, and you will see that I am working very definitely within a water space. I'm an environmental scientist at the University of Cape Town, working in urban water sensitivity, and particularly with the city of Cape Town, and been involved through the day zero drought and so forth over the last couple of years, and now working towards a strategy in which the city starts to build towards a more water sensitive city. And it holds for me great opportunities for building biodiversity across the city. Because for the first time, the city powers, and particularly the political electorate, are beginning to see the importance of water, and of water as an opportunity to support wetlands, to support biodiversity, and to ensure that water becomes an important store within the city. So how do we close the loop on the water cycle in the city is a key phrase that's often being used. Now, for some of you, just listening to your discussion just now, you're in very different environments. So just switch for a moment into a more city environment. And if you're not from South Africa, appreciate some of the challenges that we have in dealing with our waterways in our large cities that are reaching a stage where it's very difficult to rehabilitate them. They've reached a point where, in fact, 70% of our rivers have an ecological system within them that is virtually impossible to rehabilitate over time, and even if we had the money available. 70% of our rivers no longer can be rehabilitated to a pre-development state, if I can put it that way. So let me share just a couple of slides with you, and then it's more about trying to have a little discussion at the end. So you know, we can get to that video later, and I'm sure you've seen the link. So let me share a couple of slides with you. I'll go quite quickly through them as we go. Okay. It's interesting that my slideshow didn't go up there. Let's see if it goes there. There it goes there. So this is a paddle in which we are paddling across the peninsula, and it starts at Muizenberg on the One Ocean, which is effectively, not really, but effectively is the Indian Ocean over here. This is Cape Town at the top over here. There's the harbour of Cape Town. All of this area where you see this watershed is Table Mountain, the chain that runs all the way down a range right down to Cape Point, which has fallen off the map there. And we paddle through the waterways. We have a little bit of a watershed over here, so we get out of our boats and actually trail them behind us on cars, etc., and then back into the water and then into the sea in a wonderful stretch, which enables us to sort of wash off, I think, more than anything else. And then we're back into a lagoon in Milton at this stage over here. So it's a 27-kilometer paddle, and we do it for lots of really good reasons. And I won't give away all of that because you probably need to go and watch the video. Along the way, we take a number of water samples, and we've done this for the last 11 years. And those are just one example of some of the water samples that we take. This is just electrical conductivity, starting off here at the beginning and then running through as it gets more and more polluted in some of these waterways. That's the final sort of group photograph in front of the flag. Over here, and I just want to stop this from running too quickly here. This is, as we went up the channel, this last occasion, which was 2 Sundays ago, we came across a stormwater pipe. And this stormwater pipe is blocked. It's been blocked with some sandbags, and over the top of it is raw sewage coming into that channel. And it's finding its way into the channel and eventually into Sunflay, which is a fairly biodiverse and rich biodiversity environment. And it's clearly a problem. And what residents have been finding, anything between 15 to 18 sewage spillages are occurring. Right now, a reporter is working on this case. And just look at some of the things that a citizen, at least, is reporting and claims that this is verified amongst others in the suburb where they're staying, called Marina de Gama. I'll just read a couple of things. You don't have to read all of them because there's a long set of statements over here. But we've witnessed something over the last 2 years. We've watched the swallows disappear. We've watched the coots leave our waterways. The dab chicks have gone. We no longer see schools of small fish around the edges of Marina de Gama. Frogs no longer make their way up the banks into our pools. We have between 15 and 18 sewage spills in the Flay. And then the very last paragraph, not only is the sewage a problem, but amounts of plastic and garbage that is making its way into the Flay is beyond words. Described by one citizen living in that area. And a reporter is currently working on it and also taking some of the data that we've sent them from the paddle from 2 weekends ago. This initiative of going through the waterways has evolved into a project with the Dutch, in which we're looking at livable urban waterways. There's a very early sort of thinking about how we would address our waterways and the state that they are in. And I always have coined the idea that biodiversity always wins. And if we can create more biodiverse waterways, we will start to create a much greater healthy state, not only in the rivers themselves, but also in the way in which recreational waterways become and support neighborhoods and so on. So here is a river that I've worked in for quite a lot, and some of you might know it. I know that Les Andeel will know it very well. This is called the Peck River, which has a long history of being canalized, particularly in the 1920s and 1918, in fact. But it has a long history as one of the first urban rivers in South Africa. And it has a whole colonial history as well as First Peoples histories around it. So stooped in the way in which it's been transformed over many years. And this particular channel here in the Peck, and about, I have to say, sadly, 9 kilometers long, and 7 kilometers of that river has been canalized. And particularly in the 1950s and 60s for all sorts of reasons. But what we've looked at and done here as a community-based organization was to try to help establish sediment that was coming down the stream and to hold that sediment as best as possible. And once it got a hold, it started to then accumulate. And as it accumulated, so some of the rocks and others and material that was coming down the stream held onto those banks. And we created, through literally nature, have been allowed to do its work, a very biodiverse and habitat for species, particularly species that we're looking for as key indicators. The Cape Galaxia, which is an indigenous fish, which you only find in the upper reaches of the river. dragonfly as another key indicator of water quality, but also seen the movement of the Cape clawless otter, for instance, that's been moving up and down the stream. And as the stream began to create interest, so the local residents began to put more energy into this. And so here is a garden on the right-hand side on the banks of the river, which they planted out with indigenous plants, and later even got engaged with a vegetable garden alongside. Put a pathway alongside with some money from the city, and this garden almost in the canal is transforming a canal into a river again. And the interest went a whole lot further. And here's the point around biodiversity, which I think is really interesting. What it did do is it started to capture the imagination of one or two of the residents. And they became very interested in homeless people that were using the river for washing, for cleaning of various sorts, and also sanitation as well. So a very difficult relationship between conservation, biodiversity management, and homeless people living alongside a river system. And one of the neighbors in particular started to find out, well, why are people there in the first place? Find out their names, got their stories, then started to engage them with some of the work that was going on in that river, and then invited them to a local church supper on a Thursday evening and got to know their names. And that began to actually bring about a whole humane approach to understanding how diversity almost creates a cycle, a more humane cycle of understanding how people were using that river, and how to work more closely with those people in a way which showed a greater understanding. So a great little story, small as it might be, it's a really important, powerful message around why biodiversity, for me, always wins, not only in species, but also in the relationship between people who recognize the habitat and the transformation of habitat and what that does in terms of bringing nature into a city and how we deal with people. I'm almost there. Of course, here's the tragedy. The city of Cape Town decided that this river was becoming a little bit too cluttered here with habitat and with sometimes weed and reed as well. And so the next thing we saw was a bobcat moving in and starting to clear the river. And so we quickly intervened and tried to at least get that bobcat to take some material away, which prevented some of the obstructions, but it would enable us to continue on this work about creating a diverse river that is a canal, essentially. So how do you start? And here's my last slide. And in the middle over here is, if you can see it, is the idea of getting plugged in, of getting neighborhoods and biodiversity plugged in, of finding that connection. And you start by, what we did was to work with nature and to build, or to allow nature to build habitat in the river. Then you need, on the left-hand side, a whole plan, and I've just used one example here, a plan for biodiversity, where policies eventually emerge out of that. And we're not at that stage, but at least one of the things that I think was really valuable is that we assumed that people care, that people wanted to see this river improve in this way. And so often we think that people don't care, or they're not aware, and so on. And I think the team in this room over here can testify that people do care. And just the previous presentation, just seeing that a citizen is finding an opportunity not only to care, but to become really interested in nature, and that caring becomes deeper. The values of sharing with nature becomes deeper and deeper. So what can we do, or what ought we to do? Well, in the case of an urban river, we start with people, actually. We start by talking to people and understanding those stakeholders. And those stakeholders, be they homeless people, be they neighborhoods, be they local authorities, and so on. We start to build it up. And then we measure what matters. We really try to, as we move forward, we continue to measure, to collect that data. And I've just used the dragonfly as one key indicator of water quality. And then on the right-hand side, then we start to transform this river, and we slow the flow, meander more, because that is helpful, particularly in the canal, in improving our ability to create habitat. And it's interesting, and maybe you can't see the top right-hand side, but there's a little diagram there which says that pollution that I showed you earlier on in the river on our Peninsula paddle, you start to get less and less of pollution coming into the river, be they plastics or other forms of waste that finds its way into it. But you do start to see how biodiversity and habitat begin to clean the river. So that's all I really wanted to say. You need to see the video itself, which gives a bit of an account of this, but there's a bigger picture behind this and the importance of how to build the capacity and interest in biodiversity. And I think I'll stop there. I won't play games with the question that I was going to ask. I think probably let's leave it over for some discussion. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Yeah, fascinating project, and I think again it's just an indication of what is possible when you know, when people from diverse backgrounds and you know, sources of knowledge and information come together with a common goal. So congratulations on what you've achieved so far, and I hope that things continue to you know, to be successful, and the awareness that is being created, obviously through this initiative, I think is tremendous. Are there questions from anyone? There are. I just saw one or two. Julio, I think, asked the question about. Are the sedimented sections resistant to flooding? You know, and is that a positive thing?
Yeah, so I think sediment buildup could quite clearly create, and depends on how much sediment it obviously builds up, to disturb the hydraulics of the stream. That's clearly what the municipality was worried about, or is worried about. What is amazing, though, is when the floodwaters do come, and we do get a number of events, sometimes between 40 and even 80 millimeters of rainfall over a period of about 6 to 8 to 12 hours. And when that floodwater runs through that channel, it literally flattens those reeds or that vegetation. And the moment you get to low flow again, times, it springs back up again and things return. Provided you've got riffle zones within that, and I'm talking really for the freshwater ecologists among you here, creating those riffle zones absolutely key to bring in species back to life in that area. And the vegetation bounces back, and in most cases, we don't lose too much sediment, particularly if there are small rocks in that channel as well. So it's an amazing way, and there's loads of information worldwide around how to work with rivers that have been canalized in this way. But habitat is what we should be looking for, and we should really make sure that that becomes a key goal, because it changes everything.
Great, thank you very much. I am just having a quick look at the comments, and I see there are a number of other examples that are given. A few more questions, but I think we need to move on to Lucy and the Southern Ground Hornbills. So Kevin, thank you so much for being with us and for your presentation, and best wishes for your continuing successes. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And let me just add, Rick, that I'm doing this with many other people, so it's certainly not me alone. I'm fortunate to have such a great team around me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Good. Thank you. Okay, on to our final